Hello, America. So think about the crazy laws that had been entrenched north and south America before our founding parents were born. And think about the crazy laws that had been entrenched in the other countries that had been involved with this. But they've been using their names anyways. Anyway, they were where and how we are quality as fact treatment nature. So with conviction, one of the things they do, they debate and pretend their own passions and emotions tied to subjects where they're leaving out exceptions in exception nature. And they have been roles setting up offensively exceptions, exception nature against everyone to keep everyone needed to hide progressions at each age of fact treatment nature for a method that knew that this was going to be the cause of the breaching method, the predicate acts delivery system method, if you will. I'm not a lawyer, not a police force, not a criminal. Also, psychiatry and psychologists, they're involved with identity thefts, frauds. Their databases are on the schools, and these are the people involved with courts. With the training of the interbranch. What does the soul? Where they are victims, they are victim predators employed originally still. With the overt criminal enterprises. That's plural. Now, so you guys have to allow people to follow mandated law. They have individually grouped and together, representative of each of the type of rights that you hear about. They have them involved with identity thefts and fraud. They start fights with you, including they're only capable of it because of how they were victims since they were kids. All exceptions, exception nature, and demonstration is the same thing. How could people speak about success? In other words, there are so many increasing demonstrations of no one allowing anyone to demonstrate what our founding parents didn't have free speech to speak about, or they would have found out who they were. Like James Madison, they would have found out his roles and their roles. Actually, they're leaving out proper interpretation of our founders and of Marbury versus Madison, which I was taught Marbury versus Madison means, quote, all true justice must satisfy all appearances of true justice, unquote. See, they make that mean, in other words, they employ the craziness of groups. Then the group walks in, okay, we're safe to walk in, let's walk in together. Okay, the only counter that they have are guns. Things like that, you know what I mean? No nets, no things like that. In other words, no system of communication with a crowd where they had us in public schools. They have us with forced education. Instead, they use those to measure and maintain roles with the breaching method that also were roles blaming other things, others and ourselves, for what the breaching method was causing, which was his negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. So the overt criminal enterprises and doctors that pretended conversations with me and others at each through time too, with their family members and with their friends, they pretend kids to fake locations. These are people with courts, prisons, overt criminal enterprises at the same time, hundreds of different countries. So there's a phenomenon with the ground and on and off in inter-campuses and intra-campuses. Uses of corners. It's a method that was sophistication here since before our founding parents were even born, and since before the founders of England and of Spain and France, before they were even born. See, these were countries that were originally part of the republic for which we stand. A republic that was revealed by the entire species working together. Yin, yang, and or Alpha and Omega cannot be taught properly without revealing how they were more probably revealed to teach together. Even if you could draw, what has to be drawn. In other words, you need to draw something additional to it. So in other words, because of how this is the five value 1/3/5 identities of volume is 2 identities of sequence, semi-nature, and 1 identity that of complete nature that is inseparable from all and as all. Identities of volume as identity, no. All the words in the dictionary are identities of volume, and or simultaneously they are identities of value/value progression. Even anything you can make up has 3 identities of only increasing identities of possession that are the possession of its system. 3 identities of system that are one system. When one part of your cell, nucleus, cell body, or cell wall, is positive to itself, it is positive to the complete cell. When that cell is positive to itself, it is also positive. All the cells are touching. They have cell walls. Parts of them touch. In the cell body, the body of animal life, or vegetative life, plant life. The cell, there are 1/3/5 distinct identities of simultaneous nature, simultaneously. And so we examine this with the ancient gaming system and with the Campus Martius. And it only feels a game/S because it's evolution science. And so we have to share with the world part of the gaming system. Part of the thing is every country, if they don't have Native American population, native population, Native indigenous people, forget in this timeline of things. In that timeline thing, we'll make it better than a timeline. But we'll make a hyper tribe where the things everyone agree, in other words. And so it'll be a business plan, and it'll be owned by money that no one's going to touch, unless it's like 10 times the amount. We know exactly what's going to do. Everything's going to be simultaneous. In other words, in this too, everyone's going to invent for their own and parts of it. Like, in other words, and then there'll be pamphleteers. There would be different ways people do it. It's not a tax. It's like a way of connecting what government was supposed to do, but they can't do it because they already painted themselves. Entertaining what you can't entertain with positive and negative treatments, and using to get away with it exceptions that were made for that. In other words, the suburbs were designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts of natures, and then be juxtaposed with fact treatment nature phenomenon, where they could get people to exceptions, but not using exceptions in exception nature the way the syntax is attached naturally to the native pure system, where it's where it is discernible, invisible, hyper invisible, but still discernible. Conjunction to all parts of invisible but still discernible of English grammar, for example, of the languages. And this is also where and how distinctly, non-distinctly they are conjunctions of as ground, all gathered around, and more diffusion, quality of diffusion. English was revealed by the ancients. So in other words, there are people in the news who've been making opinions about Afghanistan and, overt criminal enterprise, and they have like music on in the background and stuff like that. Afghanistan has been here longer than 20 years, and they're involved with, there's identity theft and frauds between people that are also tied to timed uses of corners of streets. They kept everyone individually grouped and together. hearing and saying things. In other words, uses of confessions, for example. Formerly, we know in the church, whatever, but they also use it at all locations because they lock people into illusions. In other words, they lock people, including the branches of government, kept with the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and worse, differentially criminally foreign influenced, but increasingly. So their theater is self-valued, having been by them, because actively they're increasingly only capable of defending themselves, relevant to and as the only, as a pseudo stability and or as a pseudo integrity, relevant and or as pseudo order, relevant to the chaos of quote groupthink, unquote, which is also relevant to uses of torture and sequence shifts. The news media recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed that the people that answer, there's a disconnect between their theory and sensibilities about how they treat things over the camera and the people that answer the phones for them. The people that speak for their uses of their Facebook pages, their Twitter pages, and distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously is in collusion with predicate acts, with names involved with the wrongdoing of them, leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context and sense. But this was also containing where and how the victim predator interbranch were in other words, they were already evidence reception and precedents and statutes treatment natures regarding their jobs and roles and family, ties to locations and areas and the schools they went to, their family members went to. This is a method that uses the ground locations for what nobody wanted. In other words, to be a black actor and to act correctly white, you have to know that you don't want slavery anyway, or you're lying with the people that do it, and or too greatly they have everyone speak. They have nonverbal confessions. They have where the black and white problems in the cities. The same people involved with that are involved with it in the suburbs. They make confessions and demonstrations through other people. They're juxtaposed natures of organized crime and roles with uses of how the overt criminal enterprises, plural, and the private ones, and killers and people next to the body dumping spots, through time, also have timed instances roles where they are kept needing to hide live progressions per when they had roles with officers that were writing things down, types of officers too, and private ones and military ones. That's why they're switching and forging names now. In other words, individually grouped and together, they're recorded already having self-value, fact-cheaping nature reactions to subjects treatments that are leaving out exceptions, the exception nature, where and how, when people get in groups, they get crazy. And all exceptions, exception nature, when they're not, that is also having been employed. There's the illusion of the right to assembly. There is the illusion of order. Hyper order is the only form of it, and that's of a nature that is not criminally legalized, criminal insidiousness nature. It's also why they shouldn't refer. In other words, the syntax nature, the fact-cheating nature, quality /IES of all the experts, where they are good people, they are simultaneously still evil, and will still express that, and will still admit that. If you try to bring. If you try to use for yourself demonstration of how they are confessing, demonstrating, and reporting at each age of fact-cheating nature, they're self-valuing how they have replaced what our founding parents wanted and needed us to understand about the predicate acts delivery system method, the identity theft / fraud method. How they had words forced on them. They had natures of theater called criminal insidiousness, like wrongdoing itself, forced entertained by themselves, forced as themselves, forced only fathomable, only capable of being fathomed by everybody. There's a breaching method. It's slavery, and see, they exploit exceptions where and how they made it worse on some people because of the color of their skin. Because we would have to use the color of skin in our fact-checking nature responses to us ourselves. See, the breaching method knew this. The breaching method employed the theater treatments. These people are not caring about, they're not legitimately making opinion about soldiers who killed themselves. I mean, who got killed. And I wouldn't trust what they say. In other words, there are recorded means and needs not to trust the people involved with the forensics locations, also involved with the Afghanistans and Koreans against their own, and ours against our own with them, and with Russians, and with Mexicans, all with those suits and ties roles where they have pseudo peace together here. So they value things like stuff like war, because they have treatments of peace only known increasingly having been self-valued, criminally foreign influenced. That's a phrase that we have to use to counter the predicate acts delivery system method. To counter and to slavery, we have to understand what it was and treat what it was and is. So in other words, we can't leave out the distinct method of fact-treatment nature slavery against our founding parents. We can't leave out how they're pretending they don't realize, by pretending, so they're increasingly self-valuing that which has employed to all locations, areas, even campuses, especially database relationships, overt criminal enterprises, private ones. All the other dynamic ground roles kept individually grouped and together, sequence shifts kept needed. And now how this wasn't a maintained outcome /S could be demonstrated, but you have to follow mandated law when people will try to report things. And so you have to counter how the news media has been attaching people and everyone around them to fake words. And they've been doing this with their interbranch sources. They've been using gag orders to hide this. In other words, they've been pretending that they don't realize that they're faking it, but they're pretending that they're trying to pretend the legitimacy of the courts, because they are differentially criminally foreign influenced. Simultaneously, they are kept with the overt criminal enterprises, plural, and private ones, plural, and people on off body to something that's plural, putting their business in other people's business, not honestly, just to make lies about emotions and passions known too. Because then they leave out with simultaneous. There could be a whole bunch of things simultaneously in relationship to one emotion, especially when everyone's involved with the identity thefts and frauds. In other words, so we have to have them separate me and others from the fake words, because since before the World Trade Center attack in Connecticut, intercities, interbranch, at locations, the courts I caught also in cases of different natures involved with spreading illusions, stacking evidence is fake at locations and in the courts, fabricating audio and video transcripts. There are proofs that they've been replacing what is actually recorded audio and video after the facts, because where and how our side got caught and gets caught and is observably criminally foreign influence with a whole bunch of other countries legalized, but is also much worse than that they never had a means to hide from themselves. In other words, they try to hide from themselves, the Democrats and the Republicans. But both of them are the complete possession of a breaching method. Their logic is they are involved with all kinds of psychiatry, psychology, with the branches of government and with the military, a whole bunch of other countries too. In other words, those are kind of people that need to value, hurt, and they have to hurt themselves. Little kids, because that's where the short words and revelations of American history and of logic, it's real words, proper words, names, and treatments. So they put little placements and have people not be able to speak what is spoken by people non-verbally, relative to where others spoke for them, too, in other words, where and how they have placements in the schools involved with this. Where it is something, you can't treat that without separating it from the interbranch. You can't treat that without separating from overt criminal enterprises. So we cannot separate subjects. Remember that, because we're going to be dealing about exceptions and exception nature. We're going to be dealing with treatments and counter treatments of law where and how it has never had its voice. Because, in other words, there are means to show evidence. Correlation has means. Correlation / discorrelation has means. We have means to show how the lawyers, including the United States Attorney's Office and private lawyers and the bar, the proverbial bar itself, all those locations where the campuses of each age and nature. This isn't for theater. This is down to the finite, active, and progressive increasingly, because this is also, per what's demonstrating, it is also more finite than, and while being those values, and while being an identity of sequence simultaneous nature, further not juxtaposed with these three, but also present here now, and relevant to the evolution science, the quality of fact, human nature, that is the Constitution unabridged, which here approaches. So we are legion too, be tribe, hyper tribe. So in other words, nothing personal against the different overt criminal enterprises, voices on YouTube. And when they do it, how can know how they have music in the background, and know how CNN and the CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News, they put music in the background when they bring up the mafia, which is an overt criminal enterprise. They bring up other. They're forced. That's one of the things they have used to maintain, juxtapose the overt criminal enterprises and rolls with the narratives of the kids of the interbranch, where in other words, because they have friends and themselves that are involved with identity thefts and frauds instances, but they were being coached to it since they were kids, abused this way. So they want us to, in other words, even when they say people attack, when they say people attack others, they're doing it against the president, but they're doing it so they could do it against ourselves too. They're against all the presidents, sickly distinctly, because they have to hide roles with what correlation nature has means to show, but it needs every individual voice. It needs the finite valued first. See, they want and need to tell you that the problem is individuals. That's what the Democratic Party is sick with doing, and that with the Republican Party is sickly distinctly, because you have to discern how they are sickly non-distinctly the possession of a breaching method, a predicate acts delivery system method. They have been since they were kids. That's why they can't follow mandated law. That's evidence. They're not following the law outside of courts, and then they're like making faces and making roles, self-valuing, and making themselves fake evidences, uses of truths for lies, uses of complete lies and pretended as truth, and multi-front. So they're fighting with themselves. They're just occupying the only places where voice can come from. They're increasingly preventing that, pretending to perceive that constituencies are for the things that they were asked about over the phone. When in other words, where the truths are being used for lies and stuff like that, and the identity thefts and frauds roles. Quinnipiac College recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, has roles with Facebook, with former people associated with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and the overt criminal enterprises and private ones that are the evidence is here. Weathersfield town offices, there's a whole bunch of names that we can find out because they're the ones I know. And you know, nothing personal, Denny Terrell. Please get me a response because I haven't gotten anything in writing since I was a kid, and these are the people involved with this now, with the police over the phones with the past months too. So I need the courts forge and switch names, and the news media will not allow things reported. So they have Facebook. They also have doctors that attach me to fake conversations with themselves and with others about Facebook. They're also recorded involved with rape threats with child sex offenders before they got caught. They were forcing that not told on and worse. Let's all rehearse. Follow mandated law. Let's get the name of this. Let's get a name of who disbelieves Interbranch in Connecticut. Let's go. Someone on here type. Let's go. Get behind me. Go.